Boston has a music scene full of different styles to choose from, fed by the many schools in the area and iconic venues like Symphony Hall. In this podcast, we're talking about the contemporary classical and new music scene in Boston. This is a recording from April 2025, originally for the Storytelling with Technology course at Emerson College, and re-edited for release here on Iris FM with me, Edie. Joining me today is Olivia Katz, a Boston-based cellist, composer, and improviser, specializing in contemporary classical music, and Dylan Dukat, a Boston-based composer, improviser, and educator. For people that might not be super familiar with, we're saying contemporary classical, and we're saying new music, and we're saying all these different terms, could you two define those words just a little bit, and feel free to share a bit about what interests you about it, what drew you to it initially, or what keeps you interested in it?
I guess I'll start. So it can be sort of like a confusing term, honestly, for me sometimes, because I would say, new music, you're thinking, okay, that's probably music that's written in the last, sometimes we think 20 years, but then but also contemporary classical, I think, is more just music that's rooted in, I guess, classical techniques and classical instruments is kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe classical aesthetics, but then it's like expanding it and really going way beyond what we associate with it. But then again, it's like there's been quote unquote contemporary classical sounding music since like 40s and 50s, 1940s and 50s, which some people would say is not new. And then there's music that's written now that's like really emulating like old traditional music. So it's kind of like some of it's a time period and some of it's an aesthetic, in my opinion, I think. And um and what's interesting about that, I feel like Dylan and I are we overlap with a lot of the same aesthetics, I think, that we lean towards, which is really just breaking barriers of what sounds can an instrument make, and adding in different artist mediums like um electronics or visual art, or you know um really just expanding what our instruments can do. Um, yeah, so it's kind of, because it's kind of confusing where it's like, okay, is it a time period or is it an aesthetic? Because it's kind of a Venn diagram. Um, Dylan, I don't know what you have to say about that, but those are my
Yeah.
thoughts.
Um, Music loves having problems with eras and how we name them. Because we can't ever just let this kind of idea of contemporary exist in the present. We have to assign it this kind of historically significant set of years. So like when I think contemporary classical, the first thing I'm thinking is kind of 1920s to 19, like kind of post World War II, which is problematic because that music is now we're encroaching on 100, 110 years old, which is you know crazy to think about when we're still calling not just that aesthetic or inspirations from that music, but the original music in and of itself is still assigned the tag contemporary. Um, so for me, new music is um like Olivia was mentioning, this kind of push to create a label that remains firmly in the present, that it's not defined by a set of years but by kind of this trailing tale of 20 or so years, where aesthetically one of the biggest questions that I think unites us all is, you know how can music bend to the will of the artist instead of the artist bending to the will of music? So like when I'm sitting down with a composition, or when Olivia is sitting down uh, with a improvisational prompt or graphic score or a score, I think one of the questions that we're always trying to investigate is uh, how our artistry can manifest in our music in a way that is more than just kind of what in the kind of very classical sense we would call musical interpretation. Um, and everyone always tries to defend musical interpretation as creating, this very independent voice in music. But at the end of the day, it's just here's this classical piece, and the difference is how you're playing it crescendo. I think for us as new music artists, the question becomes how do we either create music or interpret music in a way that allows us to be fully present within the artistry. And I think that's such a special thing to be able to investigate and explore and discover. For myself, I guess I kind of, if we were to put a aesthetic label, something in the realm of post-spectralist. Um, I really like exploring lengths of sound and how those sounds change over time, not necessarily uh, as a composed change, but just as kind of the human nature of, if I'm asking a saxophone player to hold a note for 30, 40 seconds, that pitch is not going to be the same across that entire duration of time. It simply has to be different because of the bodily mechanics of playing the instrument. And so then how can I create those moments in my music, and what does that mean to me as musical material that I can develop and build on? And so that's one of the other things that I just really like exploring in my work, in my art.
This makes me think a little bit of like modern art as a term, and how like there's that difference between modern and contemporary, because modern art was meant to be like, oh, this is art of the present, but you look, and because of the aesthetic choices, some of the like earliest modern art pieces are from like like 1800s. Like it kind of makes me think of that, because I was looking online and I was seeing some people being like, new music is living composers, and this is, and I was like, I don't, like there's so many different definitions, no one has the same one. So it's great to establish like a baseline, and also just like establish some interests of yours. And I think earlier you mentioned, Olivia, that your and Dylan's interests in terms of like aesthetics align pretty similarly. Would you want to elaborate at all on that?
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's going to be some differences, but I think um I would say it's hard to like put it in um one sentence, but I guess like usually the aesthetics I like to that I'm drawn to with music is music that is it's unexpected. I like hearing stuff where I'm not sure how it's gonna unfold. And there can be lots of music where you can somewhat tell how it's gonna unfold. So I really like that. I like instruments making sounds that do not sound like the instruments at all. I think that's really cool. And there's times where if there's a group of instruments, especially if there's electronics included, you're like, what instrument is making what sound? That's really exciting to me too, where you're just kind of lost in the soundscape and you can't really put a finger on like what is even happening, even if you're at the concert and you can see the musicians. That's really exciting to me. Um, Also, something that really, uh, I guess, was kind of like not kind of like freeing or something to me is like realizing that really good music and art can make me feel really uncomfortable. So, lots of music that I really like can physically make me uncomfortable or mentally make me feel uncomfortable or awkward, and that's where I'm like, oh, this piece is really effective. And that can go in lots of different other areas of art. I like seeing films that make me feel weird and seeing um, visual art that does. Like, I think some people associate good music with stuff that makes them feel pleasant. And I think now it's like kind of this weird thing where it's like, oh, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, and then I'm smiling because I think that's so cool, and then I'm happy. So it's kind of like this weird um trail of emotions. But I guess basically, yeah, music that just makes me uh that's really effective and makes me question lots of things and not know what's going on, and is all really, really exciting to me. And hearing sounds I've never heard before, hearing combinations of sounds I haven't heard, hearing absence of sound, when there's like theater involved. Like, I just think all of that kind of stuff really I'm drawn to. Dylan, I'm curious what you have to say.
Yeah, a lot of similar things. One of the questions that started my compositional path and established kind of the first realm that I was writing within was like, okay, take an instrument. We obviously know there is one way that classically you'll be told, like, this is how you play the instrument with good technique. And my first two questions were, what if you use bad technique, and what if you don't use any prescribed technique kind of within that classical realm? And I hadn't heard of extended technique or anything like that at the time, and so it was like really just getting to be a kid in a sandbox with an instrument and just go buck wild and figure out like, oh, this is a thing that can make sound. Like, do people know about this? Do people use this? And then getting to be exposed to repertoire where it's like, oh, like this is the focus. This is the material. Like this is the kind of point of the piece. Um, was really special to be able to get exposed to. Um, yeah, I really love discomforting art. Not necessarily in film. I have a weird film taste in terms of how it kind of intersects with the rest of my artistic taste, but in kind of more of the other traditional arts, I just really love discomforting art. There's something about it that just there the feeling of being discomforted by a piece of art to me is such a beautiful feeling. Um, and so getting to encounter that is a really, really special opportunity. And it's something that I've always grappled with as an artist is where do I intersect with comfort and discomfort and why? And how can I make music that is, you know, completely discomforting to the point of almost just on the very edge of unlistenable, but something about it just keeps you there and keeps you held on. Um, and that's been a really fun question to get to grapple with, especially um, in the improvisation group that I'm working on with Ryan, my saxophonist. Is just getting to make noise and make a lot of really loud noise, um, and pull out the kind of artistry from that noise. And one of the other things that I always go back to that I talk about uh, that I just really love is fragility, and the idea of fragility and what fragility can be in music. So like when I was talking earlier about, here's a sustained tone for 30 seconds on a wind instrument, and the breath isn't built to do that. And so you have to save breath. You can't use your full breath pressure. And even then, there's no guarantee that you're going to make it to the finish line. And so, what all of those sounds manifest, or what all of that physical effort manifests as in the sound, is always such an interesting question to me. And then, what is fragility in the context of loud? What is fragility in the context of noise? Uh, which again has been so much fun to get to explore the other side of that. Like, there are ways that sounds break into silence, and there are ways that sounds break into noise, and getting to kind of walk the knife's edge on both of those. Um, and yeah, I think that always leads to unpredictable music. Um, because fragility is naturally unpredictable. It's not like you can know exactly when something's going to break or shatter or how or what the catalyst will be for that reaction. Um, and I love embracing that unpredictability and writing it into my music.
Yeah, I remember I mentioned earlier before we started recording, like I was looking through your website and I remember looking at your page about compositions. And that little blurb you had about fragility was very interesting to me. And admittedly, I'm like not as familiar with your compositions as I am with like listening to Olivia. Olivia's playing was some of the first playing I experienced in this style, and it definitely was like very unexpected. It had these really interesting swells from like an audience's perspective. Um, at the very least, I think it's very successful, and I think it's definitely interesting to hear, which is nice. And we talked a little bit about why there's such a big scene, mentioning the schools, this rich history. Um, if we want, we can talk a little bit more about details if there's more you want to say.
Um, okay, so wait, the question is talking about
Is
the scene.
Yeah, like what specific, like what aspects of new music and contemporary classical are unique to Boston, or like a more simple way to put it is just why did you stay in Boston?
So I think with Boston, the cool thing about Boston is I can have it's a reality that I can be a like contemporary classical cellist and teacher and composer and make a living off of it. I I cannot do that in every city. Um so I also think that something that I specifically find really awesome about it being here is the camaraderie. Like I have performed many, many, many times, and there's always a group of my friends who have seen me play probably 20 to 50 plus times, and they come out and see me all the time, no matter, you know, where I am in the city. And that just is it makes me so happy. And then also, I feel like there's also a big um, excitement. We go to concerts together that none of us are a part of or playing in. So it's like just very exciting for us to attend concerts as like a social thing too. And then there's always there's lots of people, familiar faces that we see. Um, and for example, there's certain people that they've created like a new music calendar. So like there's this website where it has like this long calendar of like what's happening in the city, that's specifically kind of the music that we are drawn to, um, which is awesome. And then so I feel like there's just this really big support system that I surprisingly that I haven't seen as much sometimes in other cities. Um, and we're also just so genuinely excited and passionate about what we do, to the fact that we'll go to concerts together, but we'll also um, sometimes host like listening parties or improv parties where like at one of our apartments we'll like bring in different um, contemporary works that we've discovered, play it, and we all listen together, and then we all give comments, and it's just awesome being a part of something where, yes, it is my career and it's work, but it also is a huge passion, and a lot of my colleagues are also really close friends of mine. Um, like what's happening right now. Um, like I just think that overlap is so exciting, and not many career paths have that. There can be somewhat of a big separation, which that can be great and also really, really exhausting that I've it's like my work is my life. But yeah, I think the community is really tight here, and most of the I play a lot, and the commutes can be far, and like almost every time there's some familiar faces there coming to see me play, which just makes me so happy. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, the community is really special. And I think because we all are going to college together or having kind of college experiences together, um, because of that nifty little pro arts consortium where we all get to cross over and take each other's classes, go to each other's colleges if we want to. Um, it means that as soon as we come out of school, we already have such a strong network of collaborators and colleagues that we get to work with who we also get to just call friends and hang out with and just kind of exist with if it's a stressful day and I just need to like lay down and chat with some people. Like I can, and these are people who are local to me who I can go and see or whatnot. And yeah, like Olivia mentioned, not every city has that. um with some cities there'll be such a like very high order institution, but the accessibility to kind of get there is difficult. With other cities, there's just not much of a scene because it wasn't part of the culture as the city developed. And so it's hard to make space for something that is uh, kind of seen as a niche art, I think, which is where new music currently exists. Um, it's hard to break into that in a city that doesn't already have um, that art as part of its tradition and part of its culture. And it's so deeply entrenched in Boston uh, that like a brand new collective can pop out of the blue and get an audience of like 30, 40 people in person and an additional audience of about 60 on an internet live stream. Like for a first time, we have to panic and put up marketing in like 2 weeks. Like that's a crazy turnout. And yet the community is so strong that we're able to do that and bring in as many people as we did to get to hear the artistry of people that we think are really special and that we believe in moving forward. Um and yeah, I think those opportunities kind of offset, Boston's an expensive city. It's a real expensive city to live in, but the fact that we get so many opportunities, the fact that once those opportunities happen, as a composer, I get to have a piece live on past a premiere, which is like the real dream of a composer is the second performance, because that means your piece has a life beyond when it was originally written for. And in Boston, there are so many opportunities where I get to have pieces, get out there to new audiences over and over and over again, um, which is really special. It draws people to get to know who I am as an artist, and that allows me to write more music, get it heard more, and repeat the cycle um, in a way that isn't guaranteed in every music scene. Uh, so yeah, definitely a special city to get to be an artist in.
For sure. And I've also I've definitely seen some talk about Boston being a particularly accepting music scene in terms of identities, but it is still often cisgender, heterosexual, white, and you can even say like male dominated. How do people in the Boston scene grapple with this cultural accessibility? And also, like, how does it impact the two of you?
I mean, okay, some of my first thoughts with this is yes, it can be. I think I think this question can go, it obviously is affected in like every city probably in the US and almost every career,
Mhm.
which is like the upsetting reality of it. And something that I think is kind of a um like a zoomed in uh example of that is, so like Berkeley, for example. So a lot of it is rooted in jazz. Jazz was started by like black culture and like black artistry. And then and now it's become something that is something you can get a degree in, and then it's also now like, yeah, part of higher education, so you have to pay a lot of money to get this degree and have these skills. So like that's something that's interesting, that we are blocks away from, I guess, at Boko. Dylan, I'm curious what you
Yeah, the Berkeley statistics are grim.
Yeah.
They're really grim. So 53% of the student body is white. Um, Black or African American makes up a cool 7%. And that's despite the school being rooted in a black art. I think one of the struggles, one of the best things about Boston as a center for new, holy Christ, one of the best things about Boston as a center for new music is also one of its biggest pitfalls, which is that it's rooted in academia. And academia is, by its very nature, and especially by the nature that we have allowed to kind of come of action thanks to private universities, is that it's inaccessible, and that lack of access is by class, and because it's by class, it is by so many other intersections of identity that are unfairly impacted and therefore restricted from even accessing these institutions. And so I think one of the special things about Boston specifically is that still, despite that lack of equitable access to academia, we're still able to facilitate a new music scene that is, doing its best to try to push for equitable access to the scene. And there are a lot of groups, a lot of collectives that, you know, when we put equity and diversity in our policies, we're trying to focus on doing it the right way. That it's not just, hey, we have a program, here's a checklist of all of the people that we need as composers on it. But it's that these things come from genuine connections that we're making, um, not just to artists, but to the people behind the art. um, so that we're able to, when we're uplifting these voices and giving these voices platforms, it's not rooted in checklisting or, here's a month where we need to highlight a certain identity, let's program in all that identity concert. But it's just, here is the flow of new music, here are the artists who we really are passionate about as artists and people, and that we want to be heard. And so we're gonna create the platform for them to be heard. I think because we come from a place where we are aware of our privilege, um, it suits us well to understand the methodologies that we can start to dismantle that. And obviously, at the wider scale in the city, there's a lot of work to be done that has to be done at levels that are far above us, but that we can still advocate for and work towards every day to deconstruct these big walls of academia. But at the very least, once we're outside of them, we understand and can really work to roll back on some of the more damaging aspects of this kind of world of virtue signaling and really work to create an equitable new music community. And that's really special to get to be a part of, really special to get to work towards every day, and really special just to get to, again, meet new people, build out this community, and make sure that access to this community is not restricted by things that have already had such a big impact on the city.
Mhm. Yeah, I think seeing so much of what I've been exposed to is rooted in Black art, art from people of color. And like lots of the time, like you see really interesting stuff being done, and you can like look into it and you're like, oh, this was done during times of scarcity, times of poverty. And it's been nice to see in Boston, especially because I like kind of like dabbled a little bit with like, oh, this looked interesting. And I did not find other scenes in like parts of California and Texas where I used to live as open about it. Whereas here, like I will have conversations with artists and they're like, this has roots in this. This has roots in this culture. This technique is from this, which I've really appreciated seeing.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think one of the other really special things is that um in new music, because new music is that kind of label of the present, it also means that our art gets to take on the identity of the people who are living it. And so now new music gets to be a queer art in a way that maybe it hasn't been before, because queer identity is so robust and relatively, at least in the city of Boston and in the new music scene, easily accepted. It allows artists to be themselves, and now the art gets to take on new roots, new inspirations, new cultural identities that it never had a chance to be exposed to.
Dylan, you've mentioned you are one of the co-founders of the Vibrant Matter Collective, which you've mentioned is for kind of emerging artists, so like students, new professionals, which is a really great demographic, I think, to focus on because they need extra support when you're just starting. I know if I had some extra support trying to figure out what I was doing after college, it would have been great. Um, but I wanted to get a little bit of your input and thoughts on collectives as a whole, how they benefit artists, what struggles artists face that collectives hope to help overcome. And there's tons of collectives around, like there's the Castle of Our Skins institution that I also see referred to as a collective. Some of the collectives that I think you are part of. So there's like lots to talk about, but we're kind of like combining questions here.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I think one of the most important things for us was creating a kind of structure and foundation that once people are kind of just launched into the professional world, they can find their legs on and have their voice be platformed and presented in a way that makes them proud of their work and able to be heard. Um, because as musicians, as freelancers, you kind of have to wear every hat, which can be really difficult. You're not just the artist. You are, in some cases, your own marketing team, your own administration team. You're reaching out to venues. You're reaching out to other artists you want to collaborate with. There's so much that happens behind the scenes in freelancing that can be so difficult to find the time for, especially the three of us who are on the directorial board for Vibrant Matter. We all have 9 to 5 jobs to help us sustain not just our own lives, but also sustain the company financially. Sustain the collective financially. Um, that takes away from our time as freelancers to be able to do all of the behind the scenes professional work. Um, and so what we're able to do is we're able to take on that responsibility. And so when artists approach us, or when we approach artists and want to put on a concert, we get to handle chatting with venues, setting up collaborators, making sure that we have a program that is kind of, you know, all in philosophically. The background of vibrant matter is rooted in what's called assemblage theory, which is this idea of the way that human and non-human beings and objects interact to create one kind of unified whole of reality. And so when we're picking our venues, when we're picking who's going to perform on them, who's going to commission for them, we're really trying to consider the totality of the experience in a way that maybe a freelancer might not just like have time to, or have the resources to, because they don't have the network, or they don't have knowledge about certain venues that might fit their program perfectly. And so for us to be able to do that work behind the scenes um, allows the artist to just focus on being an artist, and then also have a financial platform from which we can compensate those artists financially and get them paid for the work that they're putting in. Because sometimes when you're starting out, it's just, here's a concert and a QR code, and I've put 100 down on a venue. Oh God, please let me make my money back. Oh God, please. And so for us to be able to eliminate that risk, provide new opportunities, my role as development and outreach, part of it is also what are new opportunities we can introduce that maybe there isn't access to currently, right? So I'm a music educator. I studied music education in my undergraduate. I am very passionate about teaching. Um, there are lots of concerts that always happen in areas. There aren't as many opportunities for like non-collegiate master classes or lectures or talks. So how can we facilitate those opportunities too? How can we build people's professional resume in a really holistic manner that appreciates who they are as an individual artist and the things that they're interested in? Um, and so it's kind of all of that that combines into why we believe collectives are really important. And yes, the fundraising is hard. Relying on donors can be really hard, but also the kind of payoff for a healthy new music community is so spectacularly high that we'll work through the financial side on our end, but um, it's a service that needs to be provided, and we're really, really proud to be able to provide it.
For sure. And like, as someone, again, not a performer, like from an audience perspective, being able to see these collectives that kind of aggregate lots of different artists together is really helpful because, for example, right, there was that performance almost a month ago today. So it was March 23rd. That was a collection of several different artists, like the Venus Quartet. Olivia was in it. Um, and it was all different kinds of music. Um, Being able to experience that as an audience member was a really good way to be like, okay, this is a quartet I want to listen to more of, and I know now how I can find them. Or this music was really great, and I would never have been able to find this style of music, but this is exactly the style I was looking for. Um, so like I think that really helps with both halves of the community, right? Both the performance and the like the one performing and the one being performed to, right? Like both of these are able to benefit, which I really appreciate. Um, but I think with that, thank you so much for spending a lot more time than I had budgeted in with me. It was a really fascinating conversation to have.
Yeah, thanks for asking us, um and for just, supporting what we do, outside of this podcast too. Is like really awesome, seeing you show up to lots of different concerts. Not a lot of people do that aren't in our like close little circle of what we do. So I really appreciate it and you reaching out to us. It's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for being game for it. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
woo. You got some yappers.
Yeah, for real. Yeah.
This episode of Iris FM was hosted and primarily edited by me, Edis Martinez. Additional editing by Leo Martinez, who also improvised the intro and outro of this episode.